computer. Okay. Yeah, with Joanna, we did a really bumper lesson on our House of the Rising Sun on Monday, I think it was, and it just went on and it was wonderful. And then when it was all over, I realized I never recorded the whole thing.
And is this the House of the Rising Sun, the song from the 60s
Yeah, I think
by
so.
the Animals? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I listened to all those songs that you suggested. Well, I mean, I didn't have to listen to Little Drummer Boy
Well,
or
obviously,
the other one, but I did listen to the Schubert, and I did listen to the House of the Rising Sun.
we're not going to get to the Schubert today. I got into so many other sidetracks as I was preparing this.
Yeah, and I saw the email. It's okay. I still enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah. What the House of the no, not the House of the Rising Sun. What the Little Drummer Boy and the Schubert song have in common is that they're examples of at least seemingly irregular time units, not equal time units, not groups of four necessarily. And that when we get to the Schubert, it'll be interesting that even though it seems asymmetric, irregular, there's an underlying symmetry behind it that you can't really, that you perceive, but not in a conscious way, perhaps.
Uh-huh.
So, so I'm sure I mentioned in the pilot video that the favorite number in music is 4, right? Or we could say the favorite number is 2 because we have 2 legs and 2 arms, and any time signature that you can dance with 2 legs is easier than one with 5 or 3 or 7 beats. So we're built for that. And so even when my Yamaha keyboard right beside me here has, I think, 150 rhythms, and about 120 of them are 4/4 time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I don't even think there is a 5/4 time. I have at the church Kawaii keyboard that actually has a 5/4 rhythm. And you can take 5 on it.
Mm.
But it's they it doesn't sell keyboards, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So why have I got on top of old Smokey? I don't have it here, do I? Wait a minute. Because yeah, the other thing I mentioned in the pilot was that regularity or even irregularity of time structure, which you could call meter or even rhythm, they all have somewhat different meanings, exists on more than one level. The time signature and the bar lines that you see in printed music is one of those levels, and that can almost sometimes even be arbitrarily selected. You'll see that in a minute.
Mm.
But one of those layers is selected as being the most obvious one, the most practical one for notation purposes. So on top of old Smoky here, I could have written with quarter notes and not called it 9/8 time, but 9/4 time. Would have sounded exactly the same. Now, and what we showed in the sort of the pilot song and the pilot video was "You Are My Sunshine," and we showed how there's 4/8 notes in a quarter note, and there's 4 quarter notes in a measure, and there's 4 measures in a phrase, and there's 4 phrases in the whole song, right? And once you have determined, and this will work in most pieces of music, that your unit is 4s, then you have to ask yourself, is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or is it 4, 1, 2, 3, or is it 2, 3, or 4, 3, 1, 2, or is it 2, 3, 4, 1? And they all get used.
Can I ask about that,
Yeah.
Meinhard?
Mm-hmm.
Because I went back and watched the video, and I have to admit that I don't fully get that exact, to be honest with you. When you say that,
Okay, so let me clarify that a bit, okay?
yeah.
They talk about upbeat music, eh?
Mm-hmm.
upbeat mood. Well, the majority of music, the majority of people like happy music, and so if a song starts on a weak beat, then that's happier than starting on a strong beat. Okay,
Okay. Hmm.
so the Lone Ranger. Tiddle-dum, 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 bum, bum, tiddle-dum, 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 bum, bum, tiddle-dum, tiddle-dum. Yeah, it starts before the beat.
Hmm.
Lots of things. Da da da
Yeah.
da 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 da. Mozart G minor symphony, same rhythm. Uh, you are my sunshine. Now that has three upbeats before you come to the downbeat,
Hmm.
depending on how you define the beat. Okay,
Hmm.
but there's a gavotte in Baroque music is two, 3 4 1 3 4 1 3 4 1 3 3 4 1 2. Yeah, a gavotte. That's the definition of a gavotte. It starts on the third beat of four.
Oh, okay. How do you spell that?
Gavotte. It's French.
Okay.
Um, and that's probably the least popular of the upbeat rhythms. Three,
Hmm.
4 2 3 4 1 is very like in "You Are My Sunshine" is very common. Uh,
Okay.
Almost everything that Bach wrote can be analyzed that way. He always breathes after the downbeat, and so the phrases start after the downbeat.
Hmm.
You'll get you might get a lot of notes, like 7 notes or more, before you get to the downbeat. I don't have that prepared right now. So, but the fours is by far the most common thing. However, here's a song that is not just one layer of threes, but two layers of threes. And since I wrote it in 3/8 time, you can see the groups of threes quite nicely. And then when you have 9 beats, the phrase can start on any of those 9 beats. Okay?
Hmm.
And this one happens to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 1. It goes like that.
And which line is that, or which one are we looking at?
Phrases start like that. 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what this one does. Um, However, that's the eighth notes. The quarter notes, which in this case are dotted quarter notes, are also in threes. And now, by the way, 1, 2, 3. Is the snapping of my finger synchronized with what I'm saying? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, or is there a time delay?
There's
There's a
like
little delay.
maybe yeah, just like if there's a delay, it's very little.
Yeah, well, you'll have to live with that. That's in another 20 years, the technology will be so fast you won't see the delay. Apparently, there's a platform that doesn't have the delay, but I haven't gotten around to figuring out how to use it. So anyhow, conducting is sort of pretty vague anyhow, so that won't bother you too much there. On tom pom 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 dom tom pom 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 yum pom 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 dum pom pom pom. So okay, so the next layer, the next slower layer, is also in threes. However, the next layer after that, dum bum bum da one, yum bum 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 two, bum 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 three, da 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 dum bum bum four. Four phrases, eh?
Hmm.
So even if a song tries to get out of that four squareness, it can only succeed in doing so partially. Um, But I said 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it really that? Quite possibly. Yeah, I think it is. Uh, when I said 1, that happened to be the highest note of the melody. And that's one factor. 1, 2, 3, 4. Eh? The way the drill sergeants march the soldiers. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 is the secondary accent. I think that's pretty obvious.
Mhm.
And 3, I haven't written it in here, but yeah, dum, 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 ba, da. That's the third of those beats, and it's stronger than da 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 dum, bum, bum, ba. That's not as strong as dum bum 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 ba, da. So I could conduct in 4/4 time, which is like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, the sign of the cross. Bum 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 ba, da. Yum, bum 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 ba. Yum bum 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 ba, da, 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 dum, bum bum bum. I'd say that would be it. However, you could argue that the punchline of the song comes on the third bar. On top of Old Smoky, all covered with snow. I lost, what did you lose? I lost my poor sweetheart, 'cause I wooed her too slow. Yeah, yeah.
So what's the punchline there? I
The
lost
sweet,
my sweetheart.
the sweetheart is more important than the mountain, you know.
Yeah, and the concept of a punchline, it's interesting because I've never heard that before. And then again, reviewing the videos last time, I was kind of surprised that that you were using that. You used it in the previous video as well. The
Yeah.
idea of a punchline in a melody.
And like in every good joke, if you take too long to get to the punchline, people won't even laugh when you get to it.
Hmm.
And if you put it too early in the joke and then go on and on with other things, they won't even stick around to listen to you.
But in that case, the punchline is lyrical, right? Like there's nothing musical. I mean, isn't it more or less the same thing as the first measure or the first phrase?
Okay, there is some musical things. So it is litter. I mean, there are various musical parameters at work here. And I mentioned the pitch, okay?
Uh-huh.
The highest note of the song comes right at the beginning almost on the first downbeat, which would argue for that being considered the number 1 in the 4 counts that make up the whole song. You see, this is also what makes music take is all about hearing a piece of music as one thing and not just a bunch of notes one after the other. And as soon as you hear the second note, you've forgotten the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you kind of have to be aware of all of them and their relationship to each other.
Yeah.
So, but that would be cause you to count 1, 2, 3, 4 in that sense. Um, but if you look at the 3 full measures that you see there, the first and the second have the same rhythm, but the third is different. I kind of did that on purpose. I changed the words a little bit to allow for those 16th notes, but that creates more. If I just go, I lost my poor sweetheart for wooing too slow, wooing too slow. Hard, hard, because I wooed her too slow. That's a kind of a surprise
Mm-hmm.
and makes a better climax to the song. Punchline and climax really is the same thing.
Mm. But are you the only? I mean, I haven't heard punchline before. Is that something that you?
Oh, I'm sure you'll find that word being used
Okay.
in
Okay.
theoretical treatises all over the place.
Okay. But I mean, I haven't heard that in jazz, for instance. You don't hear that very much in jazz, do you?
Oh, the
Punchline?
song has them. You're just not
Huh?
interested. As a jazz player, you're just not interested in that kind of structure.
Oh, okay.
Let's take a jazz song. Um, I mean, one of them I teach my students is Frosty the Snowman is in the jazz book, eh?
Mm-hmm.
That's the standard format of all jazz songs. Uh, so it has the standard AABA formed. I hope I don't have to sing the whole thing for you.
No, no, yeah, I understand. AABA, yeah.
Yeah. So what's the most exciting part of it is the B section, right?
Okay, right, yeah.
This is kind of boring because you know what's going to happen, and that's the punchline. So I mean, if we want to think of the words of that song, there's probably something there too.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure I could find it. But musically, there's you actually go into a different key for a little bit. Uh, it's quite different musically, you know.
hmm
So even if you fell asleep during the first half, you wake up for that part.
Yeah.
And the punchline, well, okay, how does it go again? There must have been some magic in that old silk hat they found. Magic is already pretty exciting, eh?
hmm
When they put it on his head, he began to. That is as high as the melody goes. He began to dance around. Yeah,
hmm
that's the climax
Yeah, yeah,
moment.
yeah, sure, yeah.
If a
I get
joke,
it.
you call it a punchline, and if it's not a joke, you call it a climax.
Yeah, yeah. Grow from Ipanema has. I mean, I guess any AABA has that, right?
Well, other forms do it too.
Yeah.
Climax.
Okay.
Composition has too many climaxes. Wagner tends to do that. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And this is another thing, unusual thing about On Top of Old Smoky. The highest note comes right at the beginning, practically. That's rather unusual. The highest note usually comes at the climax point. Okay.
hmm
Now, there's two other reasons why I stuck this song in here. One is, when people are first learning piano, let's say, and we get to a song like Scarborough Fair or Greensleeves, and they just love it because they've been bored to death with things in major keys. And then finally we get something in a mode.
hmm
That's not even neither of this is actually in the minor key, in the classical minor key. Uh, and that finally we have some color and not just endless whiteness of C major, you know.
hmm
And so, you get a beginner's book, there's On Top of Old Smoke. Okay, C major, primary chords. How boring can you get? But when you look at that song, there is not a single B in that song. And we're going to go on next to Kumbaya, and there's also not a single B in that song. And when you come to the Little Drummer Boy, there's not a single B in the melody. And when you get standard arrangements of these songs, they put the primary chords under them. And I actually did some research, I think it was last night, and I Googled the Little Drummer Boy. I always thought it was a folk song from the Basque Country, the Bay of Biscay between France and Spain.
hmm
Uh, the down, bum, bum, bum. Bizet uses that rhythm in his Suite Arlésienne. Um, and I think, anyhow, it was composed by an American woman in 1941, probably just a few days before Pearl Harbor or something. And so an American woman in 1941 would likely have thought of it in terms of being in C major. And we'll come to the other details, but I think there's also some mention there that she was somewhat inspired by a French folk song. So I think that is there. She probably just sort of adapted that song to the words she had in mind. Anyhow, so if you look at my accompaniment to that in the first line, there's no B naturals. And yeah, and it all of a sudden it sounds a little bit like what can I do with a drunken sailor? But and who these American folk songs were those were British immigrants, and in the actual British folk music that Vaughan Williams, for example, liked to use, I'm sure they. So you know your modes, don't you, Nair?
Well, I mean, I know what they are, but I don't have them internalized. But yeah, I know what they are.
It's the Mixolydian mode,
The Mixolydian
same as the major, except that
with the flat seven.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no seventh note in the melody, so I'm free to do that. Um, the Mixolydian mode. I always say to my students, that's the bluegrass mode.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Hmm.
there's a. I can't remember it now. One of the teaching pieces did that kind of thing, and that comes straight from the British Isles.
Hmm.
They had song melody, things like that in their head when they came in the Mayflower. By the way, one of my neighbors here at the end of my cul-de-sac claims, and it's probably true, his ancestor was on the first trip of the Mayflower.
Wow.
Actually from New England, eh?
Well, you gotta have evidence if you make those claims.
Well, he didn't show it to me, but it's possible. It's quite possible. Anyhow, now the other thing that has happened on top of Old Smoky, that's the second version you see there,
Hmm.
and I have seen it with exactly that rhythm in a book of folk songs, or campfire songs, or fireplace songs, or something like that. It was called, published quite a long time ago, early 20th century. And it's not in threes, it's in fours. There's not three beats in a bar, there's four beats in a bar, which makes the whole thing stodgier. But see, I don't know if the editor of that book found the 9/8 time too radical, or whether just the pioneers in the Smoky Mountains uh, found that they were already influenced by the four squareness of most of the other music they were hearing, and then they said, "Oh, those threes must be a mistake. We better correct it." Anyhow, this is the version I'll conduct here in proper time. Bom 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 dum, ya dum dum bom bom, yum bom 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 dum, da da dum bom bom bom, bom bom. When the 9/8 time version, the first one, can be sung quite nicely around the campfire with no guitar accompaniment. When you get these long notes at the ends of the phrases in this one, if there's not somebody strumming a guitar, nobody's going to wait that long.
Mm.
So, and yeah, I wanted to mention that too. You talk about the American folk style. Yeah, the House of the Rising Sun, Pete Seeger, all those people in the 1960s. They called it the folk style, but none of that is folk music in the strict sense. None of that can exist without the guitar accompaniment. Rhythmically, it just needs that, and the people that wrote those songs never heard it in their imagination without chords. But true folk music has no chords. There's always been folk music, and there's folk music all around the world, and none of it has chords. There are no chords in music until, in one sense, the 15th century in Western Europe, in another sense, not until the late 18th century. Um, and a true folk song can be sung by a group of people without any accompaniment. But this 12/8 version here, the second one, nobody would wait. And I've had the experience as a church organist some of those songs. They like these songs from the 19th century. Um, and when you some of them are in well, here's one a Christmas song. One, they will go dum ba dum dum bum bum bum. Yeah, da, da, da. They'll just stop a little bit, take a breath, and continue.
Yeah.
People are
So
not.
in those times, so then, yeah, that's interesting because you mentioned that in the other lesson too. Um, so like they, how did they keep time? Was it more like
They
they
don't
were
care.
just
It
kind of,
doesn't bother them. The fact that it doesn't make sense anymore doesn't bother them. It doesn't bother most people.
but in terms of like I guess you said that folk music like before guitars. Um,
It
I
has,
imagine that there must have been like just sort of informal choruses or informal jams, and then how do they know like
well, the rhythms, they don't have super long end notes
okay.
and they don't have symmetry. They have
Uh-huh.
phrases of all kinds of different lengths. Basically, when you get to the end of a phrase in the words, you take a little breath and then you continue.
Oh, okay. Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
whereas the later music, when you have these broken chord accompaniments, has to be very precise.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me that people who could do that.
Oh,
It
yeah.
must have it must have driven like drummers, people who have the percussive talent crazy.
Okay, now to digress, since you're asking these questions, I have in my head some old tunes, um, but I'm thinking of Renaissance material. I'm thinking of the Passion Chorale in its original version, and it's fascinating. That might be the next session. Okay,
Okay. Sounds
uh,
good.
yeah, because that's a topic for itself, especially what goes on in Renaissance music rhythmically. It's quite rhythmic. What is not metric is Gregorian chant.
Mm.
And it's basically quarter notes with a half note at the end of each phrase, but they're kind of loose quarter notes. But yeah, so you can't dance to that. But I'm sure there was always music that people dance to.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah,
that will have a
that
time
makes sense.
signature. Yeah, but if it's a good song like all those old Lutheran chorales, uh, they're not much beyond that rhythmically, and
Hmm.
so people can sing them in they all know when the phrase ends and they all stop for a breath and then they continue. And there's a sort
Right.
of consensus on how long you wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not a matter of counting, really. Okay, but as soon as you have got accompanied music, it didn't really become accompanied music until the classical period. Uh, then you have to start counting it very exactly. Okay?
Okay.
So, yeah, so what happened? It also makes me think of the Disneyfication. You know how Walt Disney would take some. I think a famous case is The Little Mermaid, and I read the whole story when I was about 6 years old, because I learned to read at the age of 4, and I read the whole story, and I found it quite heavy, quite depressing almost. I mean, she dies and then becomes a dragonfly. So she started off in the water, then became a land creature, and ends up as an air creature. That's pretty heavy for a 6 year old, you know. And the Walt Disney version of that sanitizes that.
Hmm.
She doesn't die for one. I don't know. I never watched it, but I've heard a criticism of it. And Walt Disney tends to do that. I mean, he's dead, but to sanitize everything.
Mm.
Yeah, you know what I mean, eh?
Yeah.
So, Kumbaya, according to one book where I found it, comes from Southern Africa. And what you see in the first one is that South African rhythm. And if you look at it, there's neither B's nor B flats in the melody. So it could be Mixolydian. But you you see it in all kinds of hymn books and Sunday school books, and it's primary chords. Okay, first I'll sing this version for you. Ya dum bum bum ba. I'll conduct. Da da yum bum ba dum bum ba. Ya ba yum bum ba yum bum ba. Ya ba yum bum ba yum bum ba. Yum ba dum yum bum ba. Yeah, okay. What I've seen it in all kinds of books, and students will bring it to me. They say that's not how it goes. They say it goes like this: da 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 ya da da ya da 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 ya da 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 ya bum bum. They did exactly the same thing to it as that they did with On Top of Old Smoky, eh?
Hmm. Yeah, I
And
know that. I know the second version. That's the one that I know.
yeah, but this, to my mind, is white British missionaries coming to South Africa, or maybe Dutch missionaries, and Europeanizing this African music.
Uh-huh.
So what did they do? Well, they turned the threes into fours for one thing, because slow threes is not common in certain European folk songs. It's quite common in classical music. Um, and the other is they took the syncopations out, the Scotch snaps. Instead of ya bam bam, they go dam bam bam. That's much more sort of civilized. You can dance to that wearing a hoop skirt, you know.
Hmm.
You can't do the
So
snap.
what's the original one then?
Ya da ya bam bam.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I've often in that book I saw it with the third G not syncopated. It would be da dum ba ba ba
Oh,
dum.
okay.
I think I put that syncopation in for fun. Um, so yeah, it got sanitized, and so uh, and this is the big issue nowadays. The residential schools in North America and the Europeans trying to impose their culture on the rest of the world. So I thought I'd do a kind of a rock bass line to it. But the harmonization in the missionary version, I'm going to do it with I won't do the B flat. Just primary chords. So I put the B flat in there for fun. But I just wanted to make that point. And you'll see all kinds of rhythmic versions of songs, I'll tell you that. Um, so, That brings us to the little drummer boy. Um, One thing that's interesting about this one is it doesn't have four phrases and they don't all have four bars. Uh, and what is the actual symmetry of this? Um, if I make it one smaller, is that still legible enough for you guys?
Yes, that's what. But yeah, I think you can make it a little bit bigger.
I can't. For some
Oh,
reason.
because it went down a few.
Okay, and then I'll make it bigger. I'll have to scroll a bit. Apple doesn't allow me to just pull it with my fingers.
Mhm.
Um, there might be a function somewhere, but I've looked and I haven't found it yet.
So
'Cause
it makes all those jumps automatically.
yeah, it just does it in these digital steps and nothing in between. Really,
Oh, okay.
I'm sure. I think even Elgar tried once to.
I can see the other one. That's not a problem for me.
Well, we'll use that. It's just we can't see it all at once, and the whole point was to try to hear the piece of music as a whole.
Okay, let's do it.
But we can remember things too. Okay, so this is the version of the little drummer boy that well, it's I got it out of a book, eh? So I think I should sing that, and I'll conduct in slow fours. And when I come to the sixes, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. No, 1, 2, 3. I have to do two to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and no, it's not. It's going to be 1 and 2 and 3. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. It becomes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and so it's just a slow three. Every time you have six, you have to ask yourself, is it 2 plus 2 plus 2 or is it 3 plus 3? And
Okay.
that has fascinated composers and musicians forever, I think. So I will kind of conduct that while I sing. Come, come, they told me, pa-rum pum pum pum, a newborn king to see, pa-rum pum pum pum. Our finest gifts we bring, pa-rum pum pum pum, to lay before the king, pa-rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. So to honor him, pa-rum pum pum pum. Me and my drum. Okay, now, yeah. So, just to jump ahead, I decided that 1 was actually the beginning. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I did another analysis, 4, 1, 2, 3. You see that? Then I did
Yeah.
another analysis. What's going on here? Wow, don't know how that happened. 2, 3, 4, 1. Anyhow, and this is 3, 4, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1. Oh, now it's well. We can sort of see through it, I guess. Didn't notice that. Never had that happen on scanning before. Okay, so if we do 1, 2, 3, 4, that's assuming that cum is a stronger beat than parum. That rhymes. Look at that. Never thought of that. So it's come, they told me, parum pum pum pum. Small accent on the 3. Then for the next several lines, that main downbeat becomes a virtual downbeat. There's nothing happening. There's a rest there. But that's quite possible to do. And then if you can remember that when we get to the Schubert song, it happens in the Schubert song too. Pum, 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 4 and 1, a newborn king to see. Parum, pum, 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 and 4 and 1, our finest gifts we bring. Parum, pum, 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 1, to lay before the king. Parum, pum, 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 rum, pum, 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 rum, pum, pum, pum. So, and then we finally do get an actual note on the 1. And so it kind of ends the way it begins, which is nice. To honor him, parum pum pum pum, me and my drum. And those extra numbers there would be an interlude on the accompaniment. Which has escaped my brain right now. I didn't write it down. But then you could argue that the first downbeat does have a note on it. It's the beginning of the song. That makes it important. So we'd say this downbeat is more important than this one. And if we're thinking, yeah. I'm going to count. 1, they told me, parum pum pum pum. 2, a newborn king to see, parum pum pum pum. 3, our finest gifts we bring, parum pum pum pum. 4, to now the 4 is the longest line in the song, and 4 is one of the weakest beats. But I think the climax of that line doesn't come at the beginning. To lay before the king, parum pum pum pum. That might be the climax, where we have the only B flat in the song. Pum 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 pum. Song to him. And it's quite difficult to get the counting right on those long ending notes, I'll tell you. Without an accompaniment, very few people would be able to do that. So the blue numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if 6 is usually 2 plus 2 plus 2, that's what it is in this case, I think. So that's what these red numbers mean. This is a downbeat, this is a strong beat, this is a strong beat, this is a strong beat. But this is not such a strong beat. Okay, did that make sense with the blue and the red?
Yes.
So the overall, to perceive the song as a whole, the overall number is not 4 but 6, and the 6 subdivides into 2 plus 2 plus 2. And the first of those three main beats is the stronger one, but you could argue for other things too. But I like the symmetry of these horizontal numbers and the vertical numbers coinciding and coming together at the same point. That's visual, but maybe it's musical too. Now in the next one, I decided, let's say those rests shouldn't be virtual beats. The main beat should be an actual word, and we put it in the second measure. By the way, I saw this in an arrangement in a book, and not with that rhythm. And when I saw that rhythm, I said, yeah, that's a Basque rhythm. And I think Mrs. Whoever she was that wrote this in 1941, somewhere in Florida, heard that rhythm in a Basque folk song and didn't understand it. I thought she was hearing titi-ta-tu. The Basque rhythm would go like this. Come, they told me, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Get it?
Can you do that again?
And you get that in a lot of Latin rhythms. I mean, you're from Mexico now. You might probably hear things like that in Mexican folk music. Come, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, come. Well, I can do it. Come, they told me, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum. Yeah?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Except the company would not do that. It's a,
Mm-hmm.
it would be superimposed on a accompaniment of twos. It would be a 3 against 2 sort of thing. Well, I think the tango La Paloma does that. If you can think of it now, or at some point you can sing it for me. I can't think of it right now.
I can't think of that song.
Yeah, but that one has those triplets.
Oh, okay.
The slow triplets, they're really big in jazz and not so much, but good pop rock music will use them. Okay. So having this, and to say, that told and king and gifts and before and honor him, clearly could be, you can argue that those are climaxes of each of those lines, right? Now, then we have to go vertically and see which one. Now again, I wanted the symmetry, the two-dimensional symmetry. If the black one is here, then the red one should be here too. We're saying that king is the most important word here. Well, gifts, if we come to our finest gifts, we bring our come, they told me, it's all C chord for the first two lines. Go C, no. Our finest gifts we bring. That's the first time we hear a G chord, and that would certainly put a special accent on gifts, which would justify this black or blue 1 here. To lay before the king. Now, okay, in all the editions you come to the 4 chord where it is in black. The king, and then if that's the case, we don't hear the bar lines the way they're written. Now, it doesn't sound as good to have it at the first count. But certainly the return to chord 1 is definitely here, and that makes for a pretty strong beat. Now, I've put an accent here. So this is accent, this is not accent. Here's the accent mark. 2 accent marks is more important. No accent. And again an accent, so to honor him. So where is the climax of this song? Musically, for sure. Harmonically and melodically, it's here in this line. And metrically too, because it's the longest line. Yeah, and I remember learning in high school about how a drama is structured, and it has a climax, and then it has what's called a denouement, which is what comes, the anticlimax, what comes after the climax, and that is quite satisfactory as a denouement here. We're bringing the gifts. Why are we bringing them? To lay before the king, and then just a little bit of a clarification of why.
Sorry, just to double check, where would the denouement be?
Well, where my cursor is right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm just thinking of the words, you know.
Uh-huh.
So it just told me, come to see this king. And then the 3 wise men, say, we're bringing our finest gifts. And why are we bringing them? Well, to lay before the king. You know? And that's so exciting that you say param pam pam 3 times, you know. And why are we laying them before the king? Well, it's happened now. We're just sort of explaining why we did it. Yeah, it's after the fact. And of course, harmonically, we're back to C chords. And it's pretty well a repeat of the beginning. Okay. Let's go to this one if we can. Now, if we... This is the most difficult one because all the ones are virtual downbeats. I find that somewhat convincing though, because neither come they told me parum pum pum pum. I don't think I mean come is probably more important than told, but making it told more important, which we did in the previous page. Come they told me parum pum 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 is also sort of, it climaxes too early within that line. The next page is going to put the main downbeat here. Well, you can see it. Yeah, there's the one. And then you have a problem, since it's the same words all the time. On what basis can you differentiate between them? And here's even harder. Come, they told me, pum 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 pum, the cymbal crash. Our finest gifts we bring, parum pum pum pum. No, parum pum pum pum, crash. To kindness, a newborn king to see, parum pum pum pum, crash. Our finest gifts we bring, parum pum pum pum, crash, a bigger crash than the first one. To lay before the king, parum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. So I didn't allow any big accents in that long line. Now I hear that whole long line as a preparation for the last line. To lay before the king, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. So to honor him, rum pum pum pum, biggest crash. Me and my drum, which is down there. Okay. What I'm trying to say is these are all possible ways of interpreting the song and hearing it and feeling it and communicating it. And I'm not saying one of these is right and the others are wrong. I'd say they're all possible, and perhaps a very sensitive interpretation of this song will be aware of all these possibilities and give allow them all to weigh in on how the interpretation goes. Uh, there isn't one. This is a lot like contemporary physics. It's not that contemporary. I think Heisenberg figured that out in the 1920s. You can't really say where an electron is at any one point in time. It can be in various points. It can be all these different places at once, really. Yeah, that's quantum physics. So yeah, there's a good title for a doctoral dissertation: the quantum physics of music. Um, and to get these green accent marks here. Yes, yes. So we have three main accents: this one, and this one.
Reinhard, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
So for example, when let's say like a conductor is when they're preparing an orchestra for a performance, uh, is this idea clarified to some degree, like at the beginning, like the musicians are understand that this grid, um,
You
or
know,
like you said, is it more like is the conductor being sensitive enough to at the right time highlight different aspects of all these possible interpretations?
well, whether a conductor or a solo performer, um, I think a lot of this happens unconsciously.
Okay.
What started all this? It must have been 15 years ago. A student, he came into Edmonton from what's that town east of Edmonton, with the big kubasa sausage. Um, Anyhow, he wanted some instruction in conducting, and he brought this song that he does with his church choir there, Ukrainian one, I think. And I told him how to do 4/4 time, and I quickly realized, but that's not all there is to it. You don't just give the same big downbeat every four counts. If you do, the music gets very boring. Uh, so I think all good musicians are aware of this, but to what extent they've systematically thought it through, I don't know, and I have my doubts.
Hmm.
Certainly, nobody ever talked to me. 11 years of university, I never heard a word about this sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
we have orchestral musicians in the faculty. Try to get them interested in this workshop, and they say, "Don't bother me with that stuff. I just want to play the notes and get my paycheck, I guess."
Mhm.
Okay. So, but the point being to experience this as a whole is that we've cut it down. Now, there's 6 lines, or 7 if you want to really think of it that way. 3, 2, 3 main accents. And that's 1. I did not put that in there. I should have. If those are the main accents, okay, in fours it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a secondary accent. In threes it's a little different. Uh, if you put the secondary accent on 2, you know what you're doing? You're doing a mazurka. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. There's a heaviness to that. And I could now pull out Chopin's mazurkas and play every last one of them. You'd hear it happening in every last one of them. Sarabands do the same thing.
What is that again? What style is that?
Saraband. Sarabande.
Oh, okay.
The final chorus of the St. Matthew Passion is a saraband. And I'd love to see a choreography to the St. Matthew Passion because it's all such danceable music, but nobody ever does that. I did see a choreography once in the Windspear to Mozart's Requiem. And I faintly know the guy that did it. And that's, yeah, my hat's off to him to have done that.
Hmm.
So, more commonly, though, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. You get me? So the da ya da dum bum ya da dum bum. Yeah, there's a crescendo towards the end of the bar. There is almost all barred music, which is almost all music. There's always a crescendo as you're approaching the bar line because you're coming back to the every downbeat is a sort of a climax. As you're approaching a climax, you crescendo. You know, I've read it in literature. They're watching a movie and it's described in this novel, and the music crescendos to a climax. The author will say things like that. And so that's, I think, in a large scale what's going on. This is a big single measure of a Viennese waltz. 2, 3, 1. That's it. That's the whole song. In a nutshell. Get it? But to experience that while you're going through all the details of the song takes a long memory, yeah, and a big capacity for detail. And I would have to make an arrangement with some suitable cymbal crashes coming in those empty beats, to make that clear to a listener. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask too, Reinhardt. So like, just from seeing that last version there, presumably there would be other things to emphasize that structure, right? Other than just melody.
On the different layers and the different levels,
Yeah.
With those accent marks, those green accent marks, I'm talking about the highest level.
Uh-huh.
Or we should prefer the lowest level. Yeah, but there's other things,
Mhm.
I mean, the 3 rum pum pums there. If you're going 2, 3, 4, 1, to lay before the king, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. Get it?
Mhm.
Yeah. But here I might have done to lay before the king, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. Yeah.
Mhm.
And of course, I'm just doing it really obviously. A good performance is more subtle than that.
Yeah,
And of course, all that subtlety will go right over the heads of most listeners.
for sure.
So now we have 3, 4, 1, 2. So the ones all come on the parump. And let's see if I, okay. Yeah, you see, if you're going 3, 4, 1, 2, then the 1 is the third measure, and that is a good climax for the whole song. That's the B flat, the only B flat in the melody. Also the highest note in the melody, I think. So that is a very good place to have the climax. That's why I've got 2 accent marks there. And to have the chord change there and not there kills all that. They do that in the arrangements because they don't like dissonances. They say, well, rum pum pum pum, there's an F, and that's when we should have the F chord on the F,
So what would it sound like with dissonance?
Well, I did it before. If I start this line, we're still on a G chord. To lay before the king, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. Yeah, we're starting on dissonances there. They're a bit weak there, and we could probably improve on that with the details of the harmony. But I'm more concerned with the overall principle of the metrical principle, eh?
Yeah.
Um, putting the chord changes there then opens the can of worms. Should we change all the bar lines? Then it would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's kind of what you hear when you change the chords like that. But your average American listener was never going to hear music like that. And then they're mildly irritated by the lack of symmetry of having the chord changes here and here. But they're even more irritated by the dissonances here and here, because they're used to things being nice and 4 square. But having the main climax here is nice. And that's 1, 2, 3. So it's 6. No, it's 5. 1. Here's the one. 1 is the main accent. 2, no accent. 3 is a smaller accent. 4, 5. So if we're counting 5s, 1, and the 1 is here, eh? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, eh? It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. Yeah, that's probably more common. I'm sure I've heard both, and there's not that many 5s in music anyhow. If you're interested in 5s, listen to Tchaikovsky's Last Symphony. And I think it's the second movement. It's in 5/8 time. And if you try to count in 5s, you realize it sort of, we'll have to study that in another workshop. He doesn't just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for 5 minutes. He superimposes other rhythms on this structure. It's fascinating what he does there.
Which Tchaikovsky?
It's called the Pathétique Symphony. It's his last symphony. I think it's number 6. Pathétique Symphony.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the second movement, it's often called a waltz. I think it's the second movement and not the third. I'm pretty sure it's the second. A waltz in 5/8 time.
Okay.
More spiritual than an actual waltz. Yeah. You know, Tchaikovsky was gay, and apparently he died. He tried to seduce some nephew of the Tsar, and they gave him a choice of either being shot or taking poison. He chose the poison. So if you're a gay man in 1870, you know, your romantic dreams mostly have to remain virtual, yeah? Can almost never be realized. And so a waltz in 5/8 time is like a romantic waltz that you can't ever actually do because society doesn't permit it. That's what I get out of that. Okay, but you see how I boiled it down to 3 main accents. And it's our finest gifts we bring. So if this is where the first chord change. Our finest gifts we bring. Okay, that's the obvious accent. But if it's delayed, Our finest gifts we bring, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum. It's delayed, by one bar, but it seems conceivable to me. Okay, and now we come words on the rump. Yeah. And I mean, come, they told me, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum. That's pretty convincing, I mean, look, all those notes are E. Finally, we get an F. That creates a climax already. We have a new rhythm. Two possible rhythms. They're all interesting. Uh, a lot of the evidence pulls us towards putting the main accent there and going 2, 3, 1. Oh, sorry. I'm going to take that back. That was over here. Where was it? This was this one. No? Where's the one in the second bar? Here it is. That's this one. Okay. All right. Now, these long ending notes, I think I even made some mistakes when I was singing it. Without an accompaniment that makes the beat clear and puts a filler in there to fill the time, and it's hard to get the counting right. I'm sure those people, those Basque people that have lived in that part of the world for about 5,000 years, didn't get that wrong when they danced, but they were dancing. They had a dance step that required them to finish the dance step. So I thought, if I do this now, I won't even show you. Come, they told me, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum, nor newborn king to see, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum, our finest. Well, that should bother you, eh? Does it?
I didn't notice, to be honest.
That you just proved it. One doesn't. If you're not counting with your fingers, you don't get it.
Mm,
I tell you about the time Ravi Shankar came and played in Edmonton.
no.
Back in the 60s it was. I was a student at the U of A, and he played in the Meyer Horowitz Theatre. And most of the South Asians living in Edmonton at that time were university people. The people that later came to become taxi drivers and so forth hadn't arrived yet. So it was at the university, and that whole university crowd, the whole South Asian crowd came, the women in all their beautiful saris, and the men in their Indian dress. And it was a wonderful concert. I sat up in the balcony, and I had the opportunity to watch most of the audience down below me, what they were doing. And it took me a while to realize what they were doing. They were doing something like this. They were counting with their, and the bars they were counting had more than 10 beats.
Hmm.
They were counting on their fingers. They knew their music, and they knew that to keep track of what he was doing, they had to figure out where the bar lines were.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I tried listening later on to recorded Indian classical music, and it said, okay, it's Tintal, it's 4 4 4 4, should be easy. I couldn't hear those beats.
Wow.
Like in some classical music and really advanced jazz, especially if it's just a soloist, a solo saxophonist, he might hear the beat, but you don't. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I'll do it again. Now tell me what I've done different. I'll do, first of all, the classic version, so to speak. Come, they told me, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum, to a newborn king to see, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum, our finest gifts, and so on. That's
Okay.
the way you see it in the Christmas book.
Yeah.
Then, how about this? Come, they told me, pa-rum-pum-pum-pum, a newborn king to see. Pa-rum-pum-pum-pum, our finest gifts. Well, do you
Yeah,
hear?
I noticed.
It's one beat less now.
Yeah.
And one of those written out versions I skipped past does that. I will play that for you now. It's at the end, I think. No, it's at the beginning. I kind of like that, you know.
Yeah.
But that's not how the song goes.
Right.
And it's possible that that's what in the Bay of Biscay for 5,000 years they were actually singing and dancing.
So I was gonna ask, so this song, this melody comes from that area?
Yeah. No, it doesn't
Oh.
really. It's just that I should have remembered her name. It was an American woman in 1941 who was laying awake one night and woke up in the morning with this song in her head.
Oh.
Um, but she says something about being inspired by a French folk song. And quite likely the French folk song she heard didn't do this rhythm either.
Mhm.
Um, uh, it's possible that she would have to travel to France to hear and go into one of the villages to hear this rhythm, if that's the rhythm.
Mhm.
I kind of like it. It's the classical one is too long for my taste, but maybe that's how it was. And now here's this one. They called me, rum pum pum pum, and newborn gifts will see, rum pum pum pum, and you are screaming, rum pum pum pum. Hey, do you hear the difference?
Mhm.
It's one beat less.
Yeah.
So this I did just today, but earlier today or yesterday, I thought, well, let's do that rhythm, and instead of having four of these bars, we have only three. And you have to cross that out there. You see? So
Mhm.
that's what I just sang. Is that
Oh.
version? And I made a little note. Where was it? That 1, 2, 3, and if it's five, sixes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. It's like a crescendo. That can be superimposed on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or the 1, 2, 3, 4. You still have a crescendo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's music can be many things at once. Just like an electron can be in several places at the same time. So, and I mean, you might argue that this is a little bit too cut and dried, and he's just trying to get it over with, you know. um, but I like the fact that it's threes now, not fours, and as before, on the rum bum bum bum, we get the biggest accent on the B flat. Rum bum 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 rum bum bum bum. This line can be now thought of as either a line with 6 bars and well, even 5 bars instead of 3. Okay, let's sing this. To lay before the king. Pa rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. So yeah,
Mhm.
that gets on to the last line rather too quickly for most people's taste. So I put brackets around this. We could add another one. To lay before the king, pa rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. So, but that's inconsistent with what we did here and here. So there's a problem there. So you see, we have a line with 5 bars. We have lines with 3 bars. Um, and how many lines do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. Nothing, on no level do we have the domination of the number 4. I kind of like that about this. And if this rum pum 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 gets the biggest accent, then this one will be the next biggest accent. We want to have a weak accent in between. So if we think of this long line being 2 lines of 3, then it's just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 all the way through, and there's 7 of them. I kind of liked the asymmetry of that. So in this one, we're not going 1, 2, 3. No, we're not going 2, 3, 1. We're going 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Because told and king and gifts are probably the main accent. That works the same as in the 4-bar phrases. To lay before the king. Now, if we have the short version without this extra bar, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be 5. If we have the extra bar, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. No, it's, yeah, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or see, we have to think in terms of repeating that line. I'll try and count with my fingers here. This will be 6. 6. To lay before the king. Pa rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. Yeah. 6. To lay before the 6. To lay before the king. Pa rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. 5, 6. To lay see what I mean? Then with so any line should be potentially repeatable by itself. But if we go on, we don't count like that. We count something, probably 3. Yeah, if this is 2, then this is actually 3. I should put a 3 there. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you see we get the secondary accent in the second rum pum pum, which is totally different from the other version. Before the king, rum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, accent. So to honor him, see, the accent isn't here on so, but it's on honor. And that is pretty good for the word. So to honor him, not so to honor him. Let's see what it sounds like if I do this version. To lay before the king, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. So, and I think that goes into that last line quite nicely. And yeah, I put a possible ending in here. Me and my drum, me and my drum. Da, da, and at that point a new verse could start, you see. You have to end some way that allows you to do another verse in a logical way. Here's another ending. Me and my drum. Da, and all of these in threes, I tend to have 3 bars in that last line. Now here we have 1, 2, 3. So come becomes, and we have the virtual accents. But otherwise it works like the 4-bar phrases. Big accent. To lay before the king, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum, rum pum pum pum. So to honor him. So you think so is more important than honor in this version. And there's some of that in any, yeah. And so to take it as a whole, yeah, then we have everything concentrated on the first note, you see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you could say that's how I hear the song as a whole. You know something? Let's do the House of the Rising Sun next time.
Okay. And that was a good analysis.
But you see, now a simple song, it's not such a simple song, but these are relatively simple songs, and how long it took us to really fathom it, eh?
Yeah.
Now, can you imagine fathoming all 18 hours of Wagner's Ring in the same way?
Wow.
Yeah. I want to, at some point in the Wagner, just take one page. I did it a little bit, I think 2 years ago in the summer, and just take one page or so, maybe 2 pages, and fathom it metrically, but also with all the harmonic complexity too. Yeah, I really think we should do that.
Yeah, I guess the question I have, I don't know if it's if there's an answer to it, but like what exactly is going in, through a person's head, like let's say when they write something that, let's say the person who composed this melody, for instance, um and like are they in, is there a way to know like which one they meant, like
Yeah,
how,
yeah.
how do they how would they even fathom some of these? That's kind of the interesting thing to me.
Yeah, well, creativity is a mysterious thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because I have to admit that, like, my brain, I just think that first version, where with the, like with the strong beat on the very first line. I mean, that's I don't even think I would
partly,
think outside
yeah,
of that.
yeah, that's partly because you've been brainwashed that way.
Right, right, right.
By,
No, I get it. Yeah, I do
by,
get
by,
that.
by by musical notation.
Hmm.
When we studied classical Indian music in San Diego, twice uh, Pandit Prannath came and taught us for 2 winters about about his people's music, and he showed us some of these things. They were folk songs and they were notated, and the notation I could see was partly influenced by it was sort of, they wouldn't have thought of it if they hadn't seen that the Europeans were notating their music. And they didn't have lines and spaces. They just used dol, war, mi, fa, sol sort of notation for the pitches. But they had a different way of notating meter, we have the strong beat at the beginning of the bar, right?
Yeah.
At the beginning of the bar, then we sort of assume that the strongest of those strong beats is the first one, right?
Yeah.
The Indians do the opposite. They have bar lines, and it's the last beat in the bar that's the strong one. And the last beat in the whole song is the strongest of the strong beats. Mind you, most Indian folk songs don't have an end. They're like heart and soul. They're endless loops.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't really an end, a last note in that sense. Uh, but you see what I mean? Uh,
Yeah.
we looked at what the Europeans were doing. This is stupid. That's not how music works.
Interesting.
Um, and I can show you.
Now, is that like again? This is like, does it have to do? Like, is it discipline? Like somebody was actually playing around with the beats, or it's just certain people have been conditioned to feel a certain way, and then they just automatically go with that. Um,
The European classical music is influenced by its notation.
mm,
Syncopations, which you find all over the world, are hard to notate. You can't do it
mhm,
without ties.
mhm,
And I think in the early days of notation, they didn't even have ties. They didn't know such a thing was possible. So syncopations disappeared from European music. Although I'll say that during the Renaissance, they were really into some pretty complex rhythms. But the sort of simplifications you get in Negro spirituals um, didn't really happen. And I think they did happen until they started noting, and then they had all these songs that didn't have syncopations, and that started influencing the folk music. Maybe. Um,
but I guess what I mean is it like, well, because how, for instance, you've mentioned that a lot of music will generally be, humans prefer music to be in 4/4 because of
or anatomy. And
bipedal, right? And so, like, is there an argument to be made why a certain stress on a certain beat or would be more natural? I guess is kind of what I'm getting at.
I'd say fours are pretty natural, and the most basic tala in Indian music is tintal, and it's 4 4 4 4. But they don't talk about hierarchy amongst those downbeats. But I'm
Mhm.
sure they do it when they perform. A lot of this happens unconsciously. But
Yeah.
that is sort of very basic. But then you see, because in those cultures there is no harmony, but they had to their creativity needed an outlet.
Hmm.
They couldn't invent interesting harmonies because they didn't know that was possible.
Hmm.
Of course, their creative outlet was the very ornate melodies, the incredible decorations. There's a whole, Baroque ornamentation is child's play compared to classical Indian ornamentation,
Hmm.
and a lot of that flows into jazz too. But in addition to letting their, and you get the same thing in jazz. In addition to the creativity going into the harmony, it goes into the melody, and it also goes into the rhythm.
Hmm.
But jazz has the third leg to stand on. It had you can take a really simple folk song and put it the most craziest. I did it once. I even sent it to everybody. At the end of Jingle Bells, uh, I did something like, let's see, you have to do the circle of fifths. I got to the C too early there. Do you see what I'm doing?
Hmm.
That's not the standard harmonization of Jingle Bells, but you can do things like that.
Okay.
And jazz players will do things like that. Jazz pianists, I guess. And the saxophone player will understand those chords, and all the improvised notes will fit in interesting ways or not fit in interesting ways. Those chords.
Hmm.
It's very very complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Are you familiar with the song or the melody Nefertiti by Wayne Shorter?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one is really it starts on like a lot of the melodic phrases start on weak beats, and it's really hard to memorize it. I've tried learning it and I've listened to it over and over, and it's hard to know when to start singing the phrases.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that is not just in jazz. I had a student who loved singing songs by Dolly Parton, and she came to me because she tried singing with a band, and they said to her, "Get out of here, you know, you're out of time." You can in any of this stuff, you can, and we'll see when we look at the versions of the Housing Sun too. Um, you can do all kinds of things with the rhythm as long as it adds up to four beats in a bar.
Yeah,
As long as it adds up to four bars in a phrase, you can do.
yeah. Like for instance, do you know bossa nova? Are you familiar with João Gilberto, the
I've
bossa
heard of
nova guitar player?
it.
Yeah, like he'd been playing these bossa nova standards since the 60s. And then if you watch him like in his later years, like in the 90s, or sometimes he would play like he's got the rhythm going on the guitar, but then he'll maybe start the melody, the phrasing really really late, and
Yeah,
he'll cram all the the notes of the melody like in a really short space.
but you don't have much time left if you're starting late.
Yeah, and it's very interesting how he does that.
You know who was noted for starting his phrases too early?
No.
Frank Sinatra.
Oh, okay.
Listen to some. I think you'll hear him doing that. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas or something.
Okay. No, but I mean like he literally will start like measures late. Like, like if there's four measures and there's melody in all of those four measures, he'll put the melody in the last two measures, for instance.
Yep, yep. That gets.
Okay. Okay.
I hear it a lot, and I play around with it myself too.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting too.
You're doing a solo in jazz. If you're the soloist, yeah, you can do almost anything you like as long as you can even be late on the downbeat as long as you're conscious of where the downbeat is.
Hmm.
I always say doing a jazz solo is like being a figure skater. She's spinning and spinning and spinning, but she knows the music. And when the main downbeat of the song comes, she comes out of the spin facing the audience.
Hmm.
But yeah, and it's as a soloist, you can do irrational rhythms and or do things that are rational but in a very complicated way. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But how do these composers come up with these things? They, Mozart woke up in the morning and there was the complete symphony in his head.
Yeah, that's
But he was thinking in terms of, okay, the Mannheim school like doing, they called it the rocket, an upward scale, a fast upward scale. And yeah, I've heard them do that, but I think I can do it better than they do. You know, he was
mm,
thinking along lines like that.
mhm.
Okay, so we'll call it off for today.
Yeah.
Neil, are you still there?
Yeah, I've been here the whole time.
Okay, I should expect you tomorrow morning,
Yes.
9:30, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to, yeah. So don't have to worry about me coming downstairs in my pajamas. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow then. And we'll
Okay.
keep it
All
on.
right, thanks.
I don't want to commit myself to another time. Uh, for all I know, next, yeah, uh, we might even do it next Friday. Yeah, it's supposed to be kind of not very good weather, so I probably won't be doing too much. So yeah, we could. Do you guys want to shoot for next Saturday, for next Friday?
Oh yeah, for another tick lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely up for it.
Because
I'll
it's
do my best to show up. I'll be in Vegas, so
in Vegas. When are you back?
Monday.
Well, let's shoot for 2 weeks from now, but I can't promise it. It's nice. It has to be a Friday because that's the only day I get this free Zoom channel from the university to use.
Oh, really?
Okay, sounds good.
We'll shoot in 2 weeks maybe, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, yeah, we'll be in touch then. Yeah, thanks, Reinhard. I really appreciate it. I enjoy. It's a really great way to to think about music, and um, even though some of it, to be honest, like it's sometimes I don't get it fully, but definitely the big picture I get, and it's a great new way to think about
Look,
composition.
all of you, both of you, when you're listening to music, and it works for both classical and popular music, um, try counting fours with your fingers.
Uh-huh.
Try counting fours with your fingers at twice that speed. Try counting fours with your fingers at half that speed. They'll
Okay.
probably all work.
Yeah, yeah,
Then
yeah.
ask yourself, is the strongest beat the first one, or the second one, or the third one, or the fourth one?
Right.
And then it gets interesting.
Okay.
And then
All right.
as you're trying to do this with your headphones on, falling asleep in bed, before you get the answer, you'll be fast asleep. Or if you do get the answer, you may not be able to sleep all night.
All right. Sounds good, Reinhard. And see you. Maybe we'll see you next time, Neil.
We'll be in
Yeah,
touch.
hopefully.
All right.
All
Okay.
right.
Have a good night.
Thanks,
See you.
everyone. Good night.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, so I got to stop this recording. How do I do that?